Every soldier has two vows, one to his flag, and one to the heart he leaves behind. The wind carried a strange silence over the mountains that morning, too calm for a military base. Near the watchtower, the frost had not yet melted, and the flag snapped sharply in the air, each crack of fabric sounding like a heartbeat. Somewhere below, the murmured voices of cadets preparing for inspection echoed against the barracks walls. "Major Hayes, sir. Briefing at 07:00 hours, a young soldier called. "I'll be there," Ethan Hayes replied without looking up. He stood overlooking the valley, aviator glasses hiding eyes still bright with youth, but heavy with thought. A letter was folded between his fingers, its paper worn from rereading. One line inside ran like a wound he touched each morning. "You were born for this uniform, my son. Serve it bravely." It was from his late father, a captain who had died in the same hills, now bathing in pale sunlight. Behind him the base hummed to life. Engine noise, commands shouted, boots striking gravel. But Ethan heard only the sea of memories in his head. His mother's trembling hand waving a flag at his graduation. His little sister's laughter when she pinned the first badge on his shoulder. He had promised them he would not become a shadow like the stories of war his father left behind. Footsteps approached. Sergeant Cole, his oldest friend from academy days, grinned. "Man, you look like you're listening to ghosts again." Ethan turned slowly. "Maybe I am." Cole nudged him. "Come on, soldier of the century. You've got a plaque waiting, and you're thinking like a poet." "Maybe a poet is all a soldier really is," Ethan said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The ceremony was brief. Medals pinned, applause rising like thunder across steel. Reporters surrounded him, flashing cameras. "Major Hayes, how does it feel to wear your father's stripes?" one asked. He answered quietly, "Like carrying his heartbeat. Heavy, but worth every drop." Later that evening, the base settled into a colder calm. He entered his cabin, walls lined with maps and fading photographs. On the desk awaited another letter, this one written in soft script. He read aloud, the warmth returning to his tone. "You promised me one quiet night before the world calls you away again. Come home soon. Elena." He traced her name with his thumb, smile turning bittersweet. Outside the sky burned orange over the peaks. He stepped out, staring at the horizon that separated duty and dreams. "One day," he murmured, "the hills will echo peace instead of orders." Night crept in quickly. The radio crackled with static, then a voice. "All units, REPORT confirmed unrest near the eastern border. Possible conflict escalation." Ethan froze, jaw tight. He folded the love letter again, sliding it into his breast pocket beside his father's. Cole appeared at the door. "Another mission?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the dark ridge beyond the camp. "Another promise." He reached for his cap, placed it slowly, and turned toward the jeep waiting under the floodlights. The engine roared. Dust rose like smoke around his boots. Somewhere behind him, the faint sound of piano. Strings from the mess hall drifted through the night. That same melody his, bride to be loved. For a heartbeat he almost looked back, but the radio's call came again, firm and final. "Major Hayes, we need you now." The headlights cut through the mist, tracing the path ahead. The bayonets of dawn glimmered on the horizon, and the man they called a hero pressed forward into the fog, unaware that history had already begun writing his last chapter. The coastal air smelled of salt and lemon soap. Ethan and Elena walked hand in hand past the market square, a single day borrowed from the long arms of duty. The sky was too blue too. Believe somewhere soldiers was still fighting. I thought, you belong to the base Evenon. Leave, she teased. He smiled. I belong where the sun behaves like you do. Warm but dangerous. She laughed. You flatter like a man, trying to avoid tomorrow. Maybe. I am. Across the pier, waves tapped against the boats, casting silver on their faces. He watched her lift the camera and catch the moment. Why pictures of me? He asked. Because one day your stories may outlive your face. He looked away, the words sinking deeper than she knew. They stopped by a small cafe tucked between stone walls. The owner, a grey-haired woman named Rose, served coffee and smiled knowingly. Army? She asked. Ethan nodded. Trying to pretend I'm on vacation. Rose wiped a cup with her apron. Pretending is good. It's the only way soldiers breathe. Between wars. Elena sipped coffee and studied him. Do you regret it? Choosing the uniform? He paused, watching gulls dive toward the waves. I used to think the uniform was armor. Now I know it leaks like skin. She reached across the table, touching his hand. Aren't we allowed to love what hurts us? He looked up and smiled faintly. That's why you and I are dangerous together. As evening faded, they walked back to the beach. Children's footprints marked the wet sand in twisting paths behind them. Ethan watched the waves and said quietly, When I was a boy, I thought the sea was a door to other worlds. Now I know it's just a mirror. You see yourself, and then you go back. She leaned against him. Promise me you'll keep coming back. I can't promise the world. Let me, he whispered, but I'll keep walking toward you until it does. Far up the cliff, bells from the garrison rang twice, a signal he knew too well. He froze, gaze fixed on the sound. Elena felt his grip tighten. Duty? She asked. He nodded. They rarely ring for parades. Minutes later, the old jeep pulled up outside their rented cottage. Sergeant Cole jumped out, rain already staining his shoulders. Sorry, sir. Deployment alert. Command wants you on the next convoy. Ethan's eyes met Elena's. Her smile wavered but didn't break. He brushed his thumb against her wedding ring. They just can't let you breathe, can they? She said. He shook his head. Breathing is allowed. Stopping isn't. He turned to Cole. Give me 5 minutes. Inside, he packed in silence. Elena stood by the door, eyes too bright for words. When he reached her, she laid a hand on his chest. My first promise was to the flag, he said softly. My second is to you. I won't break either. She took his dog tags and kissed them, voice low. Then come back and teach me how to live with both. Outside. The rain fell hard enough to blur the world into silver. He saluted from the jeep, and Elena watched until the headlights turned to stars in the distance. Behind her, the sea hummed against the rocks like an old hymn of waiting. She stood in the doorway and whispered, God keep you, Major Hayes. I'll keep the lights on. The rain had not stopped by morning. Mist rolled across the coast, coating the jeep and the cobblestones outside their cottage while Elena stood behind the window, the same one she had watched all night. The smell of his coffee still hung in the air, untouched. She pressed her palm to the glass and whispered the words she had ended with, I'll keep the lights on, and the promise burned steadier than the flame itself. Days stretched into weeks. Letters came, sometimes folded with dirt still clinging to them, written in the hurried silence between missions. Asterisk, all quiet for now. The hills look like home. Tell Mum I still fold my sleeves the way she taught me. Asterisk. She answered every letter as if replying to breath. Yet each envelope took longer to arrive, and the space between his words became a fear she never admitted. At the command base north of the valley, Ethan Hayes stood at attention before his superior, Colonel Rains. "You've earned your rest, Major," the old man said, voice low but kind. "Take the leave. The field will survive without you for a while." "Permission granted, sir?" Ethan asked, unable to hide a smile. Rains waved him off. "Go before I change my mind. And take your wife somewhere far from radio signals." Ethan snapped a salute. "Yes, sir. She's waited long enough." 2 weeks later, the sun returned with the clarity of forgiveness. Elena met him at the train station, camera around her neck, hair catching the wind. When she saw him step from the carriage, the world shrank to one motion: her running, him catching, and for a moment, the months apart collapsed into silence. They chose the northern mountains instead of cities. "It's our country," he said when she suggested Europe. "I want to show you the places I protect." So they drove, winding through green ridges and narrow roads washed clean by spring rains. She leaned out of the jeep, shooting photographs of fields stitched by, wildflowers and children waving by the roadside. At a stop near a lake, he took her hand. "Maybe this is what normal feels like," she said. "Normal is dangerous for a soldier," he laughed. "It tricks you into thinking the world is safe. Then let it trick us a little while longer." She tilted her head. For once, he didn't correct her. They reached the high passes by dusk, air turning sharp with pine and snow. A hotel overlooked the valley, wooden balconies, old chandeliers, a flicker of fireplace light. Over dinner, she teased him again for reading the local paper. "Ethan Hayes, even off duty you look for trouble." "Old habit," he said. "But trouble seldom looks back so beautifully." She laughed, the sound small and clean, the kind of laughter he wanted to remember on bad nights. At dawn, they prepared to leave for the southern route, the one road carved around cliffs that met the sea. The manager warned them. "Heavy fog this morning, Major." He nodded. Fog never frightened him. The jeep climbed slowly, headlights brushing white air into silver. Elena turned her camera toward him. "One photo," she said. "For proof you really smiled once." He grinned, sunlight slicing across his aviators. "Keep that one safe. It may have to hold the stories I can't tell." Minutes later, a burst of static crackled over the radio, then a code number. He knew too clearly. He looked down, frowning. "They're calling units nearby." "Why now?" Before she could answer, the air shattered. The shot came from the ridge one, then two. Rock splinters scattered across the hood. He swerved instinctively. "Get down," he shouted. Eleanor's scream drowned beneath the echo of gunfire. Figures appeared above the turn, flashes of metal in the mist. He took the curve too fast, tires screaming, jeep jolting sideways. Another bullet punched the mirror, grazing his arm. He gritted his teeth, steering hard toward cover. "Ethan!" she cried, clutching his shoulder. He turned for a heartbeat, saw her face, fear and defiance both. "Stay with me," he said. "No place is more beautiful than the land we guard, but sometimes beauty asks for blood." The next volley cracked through the mountains. The world snapped into light and sound, and history chose that moment to draw its line straight through their lives, leaving only silence behind the smoke. The next shell tore through the air, rattling the jeep so hard the world tilted around them. Smoke from the cliff clung to the narrow pass. The echo of gunfire never completely died, but rolled over itself, one roar after another. until the mountains seemed to bleed sound. Ethan jerked the wheel, steering them into the shadow of a boulder. The tires screamed. Gravel showered over the hood. "Stay low," he shouted, still half coughing from dust. Elena pressed against him, her hair streaked with ash. The smell of burning fuel wrapped around them. She glanced toward the ridge. Metal flashed again. "There!" she cried. He raised the pistol, sighted once, fired. The kick burned his injured arm, but he didn't lower it. "They have elevation if they block. The road we're trapped." Her hands shook as she reached for the map beside the seat. "There's a side track after the bridge. It leads down to the valley." He risked a look out the window. "That bridge is made of prayers. Prayers are still stronger than bullets," she said, voice breaking, but steady enough to make him look at her and smile. He turned the ignition. "Then let's test that theory." The engine coughed, then roared back to life. He slammed the Jeep into gear. They lunged forward. Bullets rang against metal, sparks flying. The sound was deafening, but she began to laugh through her tears. There was no logic left except movement. When they reached the ridge curve, he shouted above the thunder, "Hold on!" The Jeep shot through a plume of dust. Sun broke through the smoke for one impossible moment. Eleanor's scarf whipped free, red against grey sky. Ethan's heart jolted as he saw it wheel back toward the road like a flag of warning. Then came the fatal turn. 3 attackers appeared at the bend, rifles raised. He hit the brakes, swerved. The world twisted into slow motion, the wind choking, her scream torn apart by engine noise, his arm stretched across to shield her. A bullet shattered the windshield. The glass exploded in white light. He felt it bite into his skin. He tried to reach the brake, but the steering wheel buckled under the second hit. The Jeep lurched sideways, smashing into the guardrail. Metal groaned, tires skidded, and their world became a storm of glass, flame, and dust. When the Jeep finally stopped, silence fell harder than the last gunshot. The smoke drifted upward, carrying the smell of gasoline and pine. Ethan blinked until the shape beside him came into view. Elena, pale and still breathing, pinned by the seatbelt. He reached over, trembling fingers pressing against her pulse. She stirred. "Ethan." Just his name, like the end of a prayer. "I'm here," he whispered. "You're fine, you here?" "You're fine." Her eyes opened slowly, searching his face. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing. We've got to move before it catches fire." He pushed his door open, half dragging his leg, half crawling around to her side. She tried to undo the latch, but her fingers slipped. He braced himself, yanked the buckle loose and pulled her free. They stumbled onto the empty road, the roar of the burning engine behind them. He turned her away so she wouldn't see the wreckage. Below them, the valley rolled out in sunlight that didn't know tragedy yet. He pressed her hands to the hillside, forcing her to stay low. "Don't look back." "I won't if you don't," she said. But he could see the tears finally spill. From somewhere beyond the smoke, sirens began to wail. It was the sound of rescue. Too late and too far. He sank beside her, the strength leaving him as the cold stole up from the ground. Blood soaked through his sleeve. Every breath felt like flame. What are you doing?" she said, holding his face between her palms. "Catching the sunrise," he murmured, smiling faintly. "You promised to save one for me." "You'll see it. Look, it's right there." He followed her gaze. The cloud opened just enough for one line of gold to slide across the peaks. The light touched his face. He lifted her hand, kissed it. "Tell her." His voice faltered, softer than the wind. Tell her a soldier never dies, he just comes home differently. Her cry echoed through the mountains. The sirens faded into the sea wind, and the hills absorbed the sound. The scarf she had lost earlier drifted back down the slope and settled near his boots, the color of dawn. Elena pressed her forehead against his chest, the heartbeat slowing beneath. She closed her eyes, whispering the same words he had left her with on their wedding night. God keep you, Major Hayes. I'll keep the lights on. The mountain answered with silence first, then with the cry of gulls, returning from the direction of the sea, carrying the sound of his name into the air, tender, endless, unforgotten. The sound lingered even after the rescue teams arrived. Smoke thinned to grey threads rising into the soft morning. Elena sat on the back of an ambulance, a wool blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her gaze fixed on the curve of the road where the jeep had burned. Every voice around her, the medics, the officers, the questions seemed to come from underwater. All she could hear was the echo of the gulls and Ethan's last words dissolving into the wind. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us," a medic said gently, hand resting on her arm. She nodded, but her eyes did not move. "He's still there," she whispered. "They're bringing him down, Mrs. Hayes," he promised. She closed her eyes as if to believe it. At the base hospital, the flag of their command hung in mourning drape. Colonel Rains stood when she entered, his lined face soft with grief. "Elena," he said quietly, "you gave him what this war never could, a reason to come home." Her voice was calm when she answered. He came home to the only place that never loses soldiers, the heart. Days blurred into rituals. They folded the flag with precise hands, fired the rifles into the sky, and handed her the triangle of cloth still warm from sunlight. She took it silently, then placed upon it his dog tags, still damp from her tears. That evening, as the sun sank into crimson, she visited the very cliff where the attack had happened. The breeze smelled of sea and smoke. In her hands she carried the small camera, cracked but still working. She looked through its broken lens and pressed the shutter for the last time. "Here," she said softly, "one more picture. For the man who kept every promise." When she returned home, the cottage felt impossibly quiet. Margaret Hayes, Ethan's mother, met her at the door. The older woman's face carried lines carved by both pride and loss. She opened her arms, and words broke between them only as tears. After a long silence, Margaret spoke, voice low but steady. "My son used to say life in uniform is borrowed time." After a long silence, Margaret spoke, voice low but steady. "My son used to say life in uniform is borrowed time." Elena nodded, her hands folded in her lap. The older woman's words lingered in the quiet room like a prayer. When Margaret finally rose to leave, she touched Elena's shoulder gently. "You gave him everything, child. Don't let the emptiness take the part of him that's still here." Elena whispered. "What part is that?" "The part that still breathes when you close your eyes," Margaret said, and walked slowly down the path, her shawl fluttering in the wind. When the door closed, Elena looked around at the house and its silence. A photograph of Ethan lay on the table, the sunlight catching on the glass. She reached for it and traced his smile with her fingertip. That was when the memory struck a flash of laughter and sunlight, the sound of the jeep's engine and the flutter of a scarf through an open window. She could see it again, bright as the day it happened. They had stopped beside the lake, the surface mirror bright, mountains wrapped in cloud. Ethan had taken off his gloves and was tossing pebbles into the water, counting how many skipped before they sank. "I have something to tell you," she had said, her voice trembling between excitement and fear. "Bad news?" he asked, turning toward her. "Not unless you call this bad," she said, smiling. "You're going to be a father." For a moment he just looked at her, stunned, and then the sunlight seemed to explode across his face. He caught her in his arms, laughing, spinning her once as the mountains threw their echoes back at them. "You're sure?" he had whispered, pulling back to search her eyes. "I had the test before we left. I wanted to tell you when we were somewhere beautiful." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Then nowhere could be more beautiful. You've just made every battle worth the risk." She laughed through tears. "You'll spoil the child before it's even here." "If it's a boy," he said, "I'll teach him the difference between bravery and noise." "And if it's a girl?" she asked. "Then she lived like you, brave without knowing." The memory blurred. The lake turned back into the quiet room. She was still holding the photo, tears falling onto the glass. "Brave without knowing," she whispered to herself, pressing the picture against her heart. The words wrapped around her like a promise returned from another life. Outside, the wind shifted off the sea, and she thought she heard it again. The echo of Ethan's laughter chasing through the hills, bright and alive, like a heartbeat that refused to fade. Rain slid down the glass, tracing pale threads over the faint reflection of Elena's face. She sat near the hearth, one hand over her belly, the other resting on the folded corner of Athane's jacket. The candle was guttering. Behind her, Margaret spooned broth into a bowl that neither of them touched. "You've been keeping watch all night again," Margaret said gently. "I keep thinking the next storm will bring him home," Elena answered. "His voice is never far from the wind." "That's love," Margaret said. "It doesn't obey clocks." She leaned closer, voice firm. "Now listen, child. Your body's tired, and that small heart inside you needs you more than the ghosts do. He left you this life as a gift. Guard it, even when you think you can't." Elena reached for her hand. "Promise me he'll know I didn't forget him." "He knows already," Margaret whispered. The months turned. Snow lifted from the valley. Wildflowers burned into color. One heavy evening, when the sky was breaking open with lightning, the house filled with the sound of birth and rain together, the cry of a boy stitching itself into the thunder. Margaret laughed through her tears and laid him on Elena's chest. "He's here, sweetheart," she said, voice shaking. "Athane's eyes, your hands." Elena looked down at the small face, tracing the curve of his cheek. "Heaven sent you to prove the storm ends," she murmured. From the doorway came slow steps. Athane's mother, grey-haired, tired eyes sharp with years. She took one look at the sleeping child and then at Elena. "You're still young, my dear," she said, carefully between pride and worry. "Life doesn't stop because one love did. Time will offer you another hand. You should take it. Athane would not want you turning your youth into ashes." Elena's smile was steady but thin. "Mother, my youth ended the day he didn't come back. But love changed shape. It's not ashes, it's air. I breathe him when I hold our son. Why would I look for someone who could never understand that?" The old woman's eyes softened. She reached out, touched Elena's hair the way she might have touched her own child's. "Then raise him, brave," she said quietly. "Let him remember why his father fought, and why you stayed." Elena nodded. The lamp behind them flickered once, like a salute. Years passed. The valley filled again with color. The once bare yard now grew roses and tall grass that brushed the steps. On a bright morning, a boy of 5 raced through the garden with a wooden plane, his laughter spilling like a song. Elena was hanging white linen on the line. The wind caught it and filled it like the sails of a ship. "Mama," he called. "When I grow up, I'll be a soldier, just like Papa." The cloth slipped from her fingers. For a breath she couldn't move. Then she knelt and drew him close to her heart. "If you must be a soldier, my love," she said softly, "be one who builds more than he destroys. Your father would want that." He nodded, the promise bright in his eyes. The wind rose suddenly and stirred Arthane's old jacket on its peg by the door, sleeve lifting as if to wave. Elena looked toward the valley, tears and sunlight fighting for space in her eyes. "We're all right," she whispered. "Your legacy breathes." The boy laughed and ran ahead, chasing the fluttering linen down the hill. The air was golden now, alive with the smell of wet grass and wood smoke, and somewhere beyond the ridge, a long roll of thunder sounded like a heartbeat still refusing to fade. She stood there for a long while, the boy's laughter echoing through the fading light. A soft wind brushed her cheek, warm as a memory returned. Elena looked toward the valley and whispered, "You kept your promise, my love. Now I'll keep mine." The sky deepened to amber, the scent of rain and hope mixed in the air. And somewhere inside that golden quiet, a heartbeat lingered steady, eternal. Home.